folks, welcome back to the Frontier Western Heritage Channel. I'm Todd Kessner here at the gun range outside of Bozeman, Montana. And today we're going to shoot a Smith and Wesson Model 1.5 second issue. It's in 32 short rimfire and from about 1872. So we've taken a look at these Smith and Wesson revolvers in the past, these early rimfire revolvers, but just for a quick review, I'll take a look at the three that I have, and they're all considered the model number 1.5. The first issue came out in 1865, and the production run went through 1868, and they made about 26,000 of them, about 26,300 to be exact. And the main characteristics that you look for in this first issue is that we've got a cylinder that is smooth, that has no fluting in it whatsoever, and we've got what they call the octagonal barrel, even though it's six-sided. But that would be the key characteristics of the 1.5 first issue. And it came with either a 3.5 or a 4-inch barrel, and this particular model has a 3.5-inch barrel. And then we've got the pistol we're going to shoot today. This was the second issue, made from 1868 to 1875. 100,700 of these were produced, and they could fire 32 long rimfire, although what I've got on hand is very old 32 short rimfire. But you can identify that second issue by the fluted cylinder, and it's got a round barrel, but it still tips up just like the first model tip up. And then we actually shot this third one, and this would be the third issue. Came out in 1878 and ran through 1892. They made over 97,000 of the third issue. And in this particular case, this 1.5 single action is a top break that is a whole different gun than the previous ones. And it shot a 32 Smith and Wesson centerfire cartridge, so it's a brand new cartridge as well. They switched to a centerfire cartridge in 32 Smith and Wesson, which is a little bit more of a reliable cartridge than the rimfire. And these third issues actually went all the way up from 3 inches to 10-inch barrels. So if you watch the 1.5 Smith and Wesson single action video, that's the gun we use with that Smith and Wesson 32 centerfire. So I'm going to attempt to shoot the 32 short rimfire that had an original load of an 80 grain bullet over 9 grains of black powder. There's also a 32 long rimfire that could fit in this gun as well, and that original load was a 90 grain bullet with 12 to 13 grains of black powder. Granulation I haven't quite figured out yet. I'm going to shoot the 32 short rimfire, just not to push this gun too hard. It's from 1872, and I would prefer to keep it intact. So I've had this Smith and Wesson number 1.5, the first issue, for quite a while, and the biggest problem with these guns is these antiques, because this is 1860s. One of the biggest problems with these antiques is that there's a barrel wobble to them. I don't know if you can pick that up in the camera or not, but this little hinge on top is just held there by a screw. So it's a tip up, and it would tip up just like that. And if you happen to sit on it, probably what happened, they're pocket pistols, and so you put them in your pocket. You happen to sit on it, or whatever stress you could put on it side to side, it will wiggle on you. And so I've never fired this one, even though it's mechanically sound. Everything locks up just great, and the firing pin looks good. The rimfire firing pin looks just fine. But the barrel wiggle is bad enough. It's not totally severe, but it's just, you know, you're not going to shoot very far accurately, and I just left this gun alone and haven't tried to fire it, although it would handle the 32 short rimfire. But this second issue wasn't in the market for it whatsoever, but was going through the Bozeman gun show, and it was laying there on the table, and I looked at the price on it, and I thought, well, it must have a bad something not quite right, because the guy was asking a pretty fair price for it. So I said, can I take a look at that? And he said, sure. So I picked it up. There is absolutely no barrel wiggle whatsoever in this second issue, model 1.5. That's when I got interested, because it mechanically locks up fine, just like the first issue that I've got. Is also the tip-up model. It's the same thing. It just, as we said earlier, it just happens to have the fluted cylinder and a round barrel, but no barrel wiggle. That got me really interested in it. And although it'll hold a Smith and Wesson rimfire 32 rimfire long, I'm going to stick with the short just to be on the safe side. I've only got a few of the 32 rimfire longs, and don't want to shoot them up necessarily. I don't have very many of them in the cartridge collection, but I had quite a few of these shorts, so I want to give these things a try. Interesting thing, these cartridges have the H on the back, which means it stands for Henry. So Winchester had loaded these and they put the H on the rimfires ever since the 44 rimfire. They are an antique copper case. And the reason for that is this is very early technology. We hadn't had self-contained cartridges for very long, and you have to have a soft enough case that when the firing pin hits it, it makes the dent and it makes the primer powder go off on the inside, the priming compound, and then it ignites the rest of the powder in the cartridge. If you have a brass case that's a rimfire, like you do on a 22, we've kind of figured it out since then. A lot of times with these bigger cartridges, it had to have a bigger case to it, a little bit of a bigger rim to be able to hold that, and then they had problems with ignition because the brass, they just hadn't figured it out yet. You know, the brass just wouldn't dent enough with the technology they had at the time, so they went with the copper case. So I don't know when these were loaded for sure, but they are the old copper case ones with the H on the back. I think the biggest trick is going to be seeing whether they go off or not, and hopefully I get 5 shots out of here, kind of chronograph a little bit of just the velocity just for the fun of it, kind of shooting at, you know, across the bar room distance and see if I can hit the steel plate with this 32 rimfire short. Hoping I'd get at least 5 of them to go off. I figured this was going to happen on some of them. I didn't figure it was going to happen on all of them. It was delayed enough that I didn't think it was going to go off. So that one went off, and that way I get to demonstrate at least what what looks like a cylinder arbor that doesn't go all the way through the gun, but looks like a cylinder arbor from when it's closed up with a cylinder in it. All that is just a ejector rod. Knock out your empty case. So I got a reading of 435 after a lot of frustration. So let's see if I can rearrange some of these that didn't work for me, so that we're striking a different part of the case, entirely different part of the case. And with the new spring tension, I tightened up the mainspring. There's an adjustment screw on the outside of the not the back strap, but the fore strap. And you can get a screwdriver in there and tighten that, push that screw in a little bit so that it tightens up the mainspring. Puts more tension on the mainspring. So, all right, I got her 5 put back in here. We'll see if we can get any of these guys to go off with this tighter tension that I put on that spring. There we go. 463.9. Well, there's still some stubborn ones here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and knock these out of here. When it does go off, it's a pretty pleasant gun to shoot, and they did make ammo for it not too terrible long ago. I guess it was actually the 90s that Navy Arms brought it in from Brazil, and that's where I thought I was going to have to go after we had multiple misfires here. But let's just see if we can get a couple more to go off under this new spring tension. And we might have to just live with that until until new ammo shows up. Or it's hard to know if 463, 464 feet per second is what this gun will do, because you don't know what the powder charge is burning at. You know, how much of that, with all the trouble that we've had, I'm not convinced that that powder charge is doing everything it could do if it was brand new. So there might be some waste in there. We don't know if these things got wet. We don't know what happened in the last 150 years. But I'm going to get some new Navy Arms ammo. I'm going to compare it to the 464 feet per second, and hopefully be able to just see if there's a difference between that reproduction ammo that came out about 30 years ago and the original. At least I got 2 shots downrange, and we can work with it and then see what that new ammo does as far as velocity goes. Hit the plate both times, which is only about maybe 15 feet away, but that's about all the farther you would expect with this particular firearm. For us to determine the energy of this 32 rimfire cartridge, we're going to go back to our old familiar formula, which is mass times velocity squared divided by our constant 450,437. And you might notice that the constant has changed a little bit, and because of the viewers commenting and things, I'm using a new acceleration of gravity that's a little more applicable below the 50th latitude, and that's 37.174 feet per second. And so that gives me a little bit of a changed constant, but I feel confident it's not going to change things a whole lot, but it is a little more, I guess, a little more accurate. So we're going to take that formula and we're going to plug in some numbers. So I only had 2 of them that went off, and so I only got 2 to average. And the average came out at 449.6 feet per second. And I know that my bullet is a weight, has a mass of 80 grains. So if I multiply those 80 grains by 449.6 squared, divide it by my constant of 450,437, I get a foot-pound measurement in energy of 35.90 foot-pounds. Well, that's not a whole lot. And if you go back to the comparing pocket pistols video, you'll see, and shooting the 32 centerfire, you'll see this is about half the energy of that 32 centerfire. So I'm a little curious about how this would really turn out had I had better ammunition in the 32 rimfire, because I can hardly believe that the 32 centerfire would have twice the energy. And I'm kind of wondering if it's not those antique shells that who knows what happened, they got wet. Whatever could happen to a shell over a course of 100 and some years, and it very likely could be that we're not getting a true measurement of that original 32 rimfire. So we'll bring the old Smith and Wesson Model 1.5 second issue back out again. We'll compare whatever ammo I can get a hold of that's a little more new, that we're more convinced it'll go off. We'll compare that to this old rimfire ammo and see what the differences are. So kind of fun to play around with regardless. It's fun to have a gun from the 1870s that's shootable, a little pocket gun, especially with the model that is so apt to have that barrel wobble, and this has none. So I was excited about that. At least got a couple to go off. So if you like the video, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button as well. We would just love to have you. And once again, for the Frontier Western Heritage channel, it's thanks for coming. Oops, I missed my window. we gotta wait for the commandos to reload. As soon as I get going, he's gonna do it again. Hey folks, welcome back to the Frontier Western Heritage. So I've had this first issue, number 1.5, for doggone it, what in the devil? Seriously.
It scared me.
Scared me too. Is the film running?
Yeah.
Well, I'll be darned. We got one to go off.